A quiet girl stands in a corner. No one sees her, but she has a secret story that changes everything. Ladies in Waiting by Adriana Trigiani brings hope, builds confidence, and makes you interesting. Watch my summary and read it.
Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're doing something a little different, almost a masterclass in historical reinvention. We are plunging into this really remarkable anthology. It's called Ladies in Waiting, Jane Austen's Unsung Characters.
It's a fantastic premise.
It is. And we've got a whole stack of sources here, all detailing how these modern authors took, these beloved but so often silenced secondary figures from Austen's world.
The ones on the sidelines. The chatty neighbor, the silly sister.
Exactly, the traumatized adolescent. And these authors have gifted them not just news stories, but full agency, a sense of purpose, and the kind of connection that, frankly, they were often denied back in the early 19th century.
It's such a profound exercise, really, and I think we need to frame it as a form of literary critique that's sort of disguised as fan fiction.
That's a great way to put it. Critique disguised as fan fiction.
Because the core of this deep dive for us has to be understanding the enduring appeal of revisiting these specific characters, the ones whom Austen, let's be honest, often dismissed with a very sharp line or condescended to.
Or just defined by their trauma, like you said, or their lack of social standing.
Precisely. This anthology, it feels like a direct response to a very modern but also a very enduring reader desire. You finish one of Austen's novels and you think, I always want more from this world.
Always.
But this is different. It's more than just wanting more. It feels like we, as modern readers, feel an emotional and maybe even a societal debt is owed to these minor figures, the ones who really got the literary short end of the stick.
A debt. I love that phrasing, owing a literary debt. It's not just for fun, it's restorative.
It is.
And Adriana Trigiani, in one of the introductions, she notes that the authors were really inspired by Austen's most celebrated themes: self-love, connection, passion, purpose. It's about, as she puts it, allowing the literary garden to grow beyond those 6 original novels.
A beautiful metaphor.
But what I found most fascinating right from the get-go was the diversity of the approach. This isn't just a collection of stories asking, what happened next in Highbury.
No, not at all. And that's its genius. The authors demonstrate the just the astonishing flexibility of Austen's character archetypes. You see this radical transplantation.
Radical is the word for it.
Some characters, yes, they remain firmly in the Regency era. We see Lydia Bennet finding a second chance, for instance.
Yeah.
But others are they're hurled into completely different American contexts.
I mean, it's almost dizzying. We're talking about Mary Bennet. Boring, pedantic Mary Bennet becoming a financially anxious, deeply intellectual New Yorker.
Right.
A woman who has to literally plumb her own leaking Greenwich Village brownstone to save it from the predatory clutches of a cousin who is, for all intents and purposes, a modern William Collins.
It's perfect. The smarmy, entitled relative is a timeless archetype.
And then there's the really shocking reinvention of Caroline Bingley. I mean, my jaw dropped. She's now Caroline Bliguet, a white-passing Jean de couleur from the high-status, very complex society of New Orleans.
A world with its own incredibly rigid rules.
Incredibly rigid. And from there, she's thrust into the chaos and the harsh racial pragmatism of the American Western frontier in 1893.
And the fact that these characters who were defined by the rigid social contracts of, say, 1815, that they still resonate, that they still work when you place them in the equally rigid but just differently structured social contracts of the late 19th century American West or modern New York.
Sure, it's so much.
It speaks volumes about the universal nature of Austen's insights into class and gender, and especially financial anxiety. Those things don't go away.
No, they just change their clothes. And this brings up the real value of this kind of transformative historical fiction. It goes so far beyond simple sequel writing, it becomes a critical re-engagement with the canon.
Yeah.
And Louisa James, who wrote the story for Margaret Dashwood, she admits she was particularly indignant about Austen's dismissal of Margaret.
I can see why Margaret is just sort of discarded.
Completely. James felt her natural spirited sensibility was just flattened into pragmatic sense by Austen. And she wanted to correct that.
That indignation, that feeling of what you could call restorative literary justice, that's the engine of the entire collection.
That's it.
You have to remember, Austen had a clear moral and social framework she needed to uphold in her novels. And often, these secondary characters, they existed merely to serve that structure. That was their only job.
They were plot devices or warnings.
Exactly. They were cautionary tales, like Lydia, or they were figures of comic relief, like Miss Bates. So by giving them a new voice, a new inner life, these modern authors are essentially performing a literary intervention.
An intervention, I like that.
They're stepping in and saying, the emotional experience and the complexity of these characters were greater than your narrow social lens allowed, Jane. We're here to repair the psychic damage.
That is such a powerful way to frame it. Okay, so to truly appreciate the liberation that these modern narratives offer, I think we need to do an exhaustive analysis of who these unsung characters were in their original, very constrained context.
We have to. We need to establish the baseline.
What was the specific nature of their silence or the condescension they faced?
Well, let's start with the classic example, the one everyone thinks of, Miss Bates from Emma.
Of course.
She is the quintessential chatterbox. She's defined almost entirely by her relentless, trivial talk. And her most famous moment is, of course, the rather famous barb that humiliated me in public and on the page at the Box Hill picnic.
Where Emma just cruelly mocks her silliness in front of everyone. It's a brutal scene.
It is. It's the moment Emma has to learn from. But it comes at Miss Bates's expense.
And what makes Eleanor Lippman's reinvention of her as Hetty Bates so immediately effective is that it reframes that chatter. It gives it a reason. Hetty is defined by her profound poverty and her complete dependence on Highbury society. She even notes in the story that if she was at times a great talker upon little matters, it was simply nerves.
Nerves.
Pure nerves caused by the sheer possibility and the terror of spending time with Highbury's grandest family, the Woodhouses. It wasn't foolishness, it was anxiety.
And her entire existence is conditional. It's completely dependent on the goodwill of others. She and her mother, the story reminds us, lived in a very small way in reduced circumstances.
That phrase from Austen is so devastating. A very small way.
And the sources for this new story, they really emphasize the concrete reality of that. Her clothes were hand-me-downs offered to me, the late vicar's daughter, by widowers eager to make room for their new wives' frocks.
Wow.
Just think about the psychology of that. This is the heartbreaking detail of genteel poverty. She is constantly physically reminded of her status as an object of charity every time she gets dressed.
So her chatter isn't just silliness.
Not at all. It is a desperate defense mechanism against social invisibility and the very real, very present threat of complete financial ruin. If people forget you exist, they stop inviting you, they stop giving you their old dresses, and then what?
The stakes are incredibly high for her. So her new story, which is this attempt to secure a role as Mr. Woodhouse's companion, it's not a whim. It's not some frivolous romantic plot.
No, it's a pragmatic fight for survival that's just masked as a chance for a late-life romance. It's strategy.
Now, compare that very pragmatic, very vocal anxiety to the profound silence and trauma surrounding Georgiana Darcy from Pride and Prejudice.
A complete opposite.
Right. She's absolutely central to the plot. I mean, her near elopement with Wickham is the catalyst for Darcy's whole confession and his transformation.
It's the key that unlocks the whole second half of the novel.
But she has, and this is a quote from the analysis, no voice within its pages. None.
She is a figure defined entirely by her vulnerability. We only know her backstory through Darcy's famous letter to Elizabeth.
We never hear from her.
Never. Darcy describes her trauma and how she was unable to support the idea of grieving and offending a brother whom she almost looked up to as a father. That's what saved her reputation, her loyalty to him, not her own agency.
And years later, she's still this silent object requiring constant guardianship. Her experience is used primarily to demonstrate Darcy's virtue and his sense of responsibility.
It's not about her complex emotional processing of what must have been a terrifying and also perhaps thrilling experience for a 15-year-old.
And then we shift to Lydia Bennet, also from Pride and Prejudice. If Georgiana is silent trauma, Lydia is loud disgrace.
Yes. Austen treats her as a moral warning sign. She is the silly, spoiled younger sister whose impulsive decision condemned her to an unhappy marriage.
She's the embodiment of the idea that a loss of virtue in a female is irretrievable. It's a stain that threatens the reputation and the marital chances of her entire family.
She's a social liability.
A huge one. And this anthology, specifically Diana Quincy's story, it gives her something Austen never intended: repentance and a second chance.
Which feels so necessary.
It does. We meet her at 36. She's a widow, she's living in quiet solitude, and she's gardening to cope with her soiled reputation. This one choice, to show her as a mature woman gardening instantly shifts her from being a teenage caricature to a grown woman grappling with the real lifelong consequences of a devastating error.
It allows her to be more than her mistake.
Exactly. Finally, let's just touch upon Margaret Dashwood from Sense and Sensibility. Austen dismisses her with what I consider the most brutally condescending line in the entire canon.
It's pretty rough.
She says Margaret had imbibed too much of Marianne's romance without having much of her sense and was unlikely to equal her sisters at a more advanced period of life.
That word equal, it's so damning. It suggests her value is purely comparative to her more successful, more sensible sisters.
There's no room for her to be her own person. And Eloisa James, the author of her story, uses this exact dismissal as Margaret's core motivation.
She weaponizes it.
She does. Margaret is now 19. She's writing her memoir and her first novel, and she is actively and critically analyzing her sister's sensible, yet, in her view, boring marriages.
She sees them as cautionary tales of a different kind.
A perfect way to put it. She vows to marry for passion and to be on fire, actively rejecting the sensible, pragmatic path that Austen prescribed for her. She's fighting back against her own author.
And this deep examination of their original context, it really underscores the historical stakes for these characters. This wasn't hyperbole back then. The consequences were absolutely life-altering.
Exactly. The entire social structure rested on female conduct and financial security. Lydia's elopement didn't just affect her. It meant, and I'm quoting here, ruining her whole family. It would have condemned her sisters to a life of social exclusion and likely spinsterhood because of the stain on their name.
Which is why Darcy's intervention, paying Wickham off, wasn't just a romantic gesture for Elizabeth. It was a necessary act of social triage to save the entire Bennet name.
Right. And Miss Bates's situation was just as precarious, just in a quieter way. Her reduced circumstances meant she was literally living on charity and hand-me-downs, constantly forced to be obliging and grateful just to maintain her minimal place at the periphery of Highbury society.
Her anxiety wasn't an overreaction. It was a completely irrational fear rooted in her day-to-day financial reality.
And Margaret's financial stakes were sort of invisible but ever-present. She was only going to be financially secure because Colonel Brandon gifted her a handsome dowry.
Yeah.
Without that, her independence would be non-existent.
And Georgiana. She was a high-value, vulnerable heiress at 15 years old without proper guardianship, which is what Wickham exploited so perfectly. The new fiction, what it promises to restore to all these figures, is something crucial. Agency, validation, and a sense of self-worth that the rigid, unforgiving society of 1815 actively denied them. It's the contrast between the severity of the original social constraints, where one wrong move could condemn you and your entire family, versus the liberation offered by these modern narratives, which allow them to define their own happiness.
Okay, so that's the setup. Let's look now at the delicate balance these authors have to strike between that factual adherence to history and their own creative license. And we have to start with the delightful Miss Bates story. Miss Bates bobs her hair.
I love this one.
The plot hinges on something that seems so small, so trivial on the surface, a makeover.
But the central plot is, it's quietly revolutionary for the Regency period. You have Emma and Isabella, the Knightley daughters, and they launch this campaign to make heady Miss Bates Mr. Woodhouse's companion.
Or possibly his wife.
Or possibly his wife, right, to keep him sane and occupied in his old age. But the first and biggest hurdle they face is her physical appearance, which just screams poverty and middle age.
And the makeover measures are so detailed and wonderfully, historically specific. They go into the attic and they retrieve the late Mrs. Woodhouse's vintage dresses.
Which, of course, need adjustments.
Of course. Gussets added and voile panels stitched above the immodest necklines for propriety. That description alone tells you so much about the transition in fashion and the strictness of propriety over just one generation.
But the real drama, the true test of social constraint, is the haircut.
The bob.
Yes. Hetty's life is literally measured in the length of her braid, which she says gave me headaches because it was so heavy. And Emma, in her classic commanding way, just decrees, it must be cut and cut right.
And this is where we get this fascinating historical tangent on the concept of vanity. Mr. Knightley suggests they go to London for it, but he immediately cites Frank Churchill's journey of 16 miles from Highbury to London for a haircut.
And he reminds them that this act was cited as an example of his vanity and profligacy.
So, if a simple haircut for a wealthy, fashionable gentleman was considered scandalous and a sign of profligacy, Just imagine the social implications for a poor, unmarried, middle-aged woman like Miss Bates.
It's unthinkable.
That one small detail tells you everything you need to know about the societal control over female presentation and spending.
And they run into that control immediately. They get to London and are turned away at a respectable gentleman's barber in Mayfair. The barber's wife comes out and just yells, "Go away!"
She assumes they're not gentlewomen or that they're there for something else.
Exactly. It's a hilarious but really stark depiction of how intimate women's services were strictly segregated from the male public sphere. Emma tries to mention paying, remuneration, and the woman just snips back, "I bet you have plenty."
It's so good. But undaunted, they find a solution. And this is what grounds the story in such an unexpected historical reality.
I loved this part.
They're directed by a broad-minded bishop to a rabbi's wig maker and barber on Petticoat Lane.
This inclusion of an unexpected social and religious group, a Jewish wig maker in the East End, it adds this necessary layer of authenticity to London's diversity that Austen herself rarely, if ever, touched upon. It just opens up the world beautifully.
It does. And the culture clash that follows is just priceless. Mrs. Eichenbaum, the wigmaker's wife, is present to maintain propriety. And without any warning, she just saws through Hetty's lifelong braid.
No ceremony, just snip.
And Hetty cries out at the nothingness left behind. She's having this moment of profound identity crisis, and Mrs. Eichenbaum just looks at the severed braid on the floor and asks, in this very blunt English, "1 bob I pay."
A shilling?
"A shilling," Isabella whispers to her. "She thinks we came to sell your hair."
The idea that Hetty's hair, the symbol of her entire past life, her maidenhood, is worth a mere shilling, maybe enough to buy a cheap chicken, it just highlights the pragmatic realities of working-class life.
And it contrasts so sharply with Hetty's own romanticized grief over her lost identity. The Damage Control is pure Regency comedy of manners. They immediately promise her a beautiful bonnet or two.
Which is always the solution.
The ending of this story, though, is what elevates it into a really beautifully constructed critique of Austen's world.
It's quite ambiguous.
Very. Hetty's hopes are raised when a snowstorm forces her to stay overnight at Hartfield. Mr. Woodhouse asks her to stay to keep me company.
So she sees her chance.
She takes this opportunity. She has the makeover. She has the proximity, the shared intimacy of the fire, and she decides to confess. She tells him about the London trip and the true hopeful motivation behind it. She even drops her shawl, trying desperately to provoke some kind of romantic or even scandalous reaction from him.
They're nothing.
Utterly oblivious. When Hetty asks him if he thinks her staying overnight is proper, he just looks puzzled. He asks, "Miss Bates, how could her presence provoke anything but propriety?"
Oh, that's devastating.
He cannot, or maybe he will not, attach any concept of scandal or romance to her as a person. She is, to him, a permanent fixture of propriety, a piece of furniture.
So when she confesses the great effort, the wishful thinking, what does he say?
She hears not a compliment or an adjective, just silence. And it's a devastating, sophisticated critique. It shows that even when a character like Miss Bates is granted the chance for agency, the constraints of Woodhouse's supreme self-absorption and Highbury's general condescension are just too vast to overcome.
So it critiques Austen's world by showing that even personal liberation might not be enough to overcome ingrained societal blindness. People see what they expect to see.
Exactly. Okay, so from that subtle critique, let's pivot to Margaret Dashwood's very loud, very romantic manifesto, Sensibility and Snapdragons.
Margaret is the ultimate romantic rebellion at 19.
She is. She's writing her memoir, her first novel, and she's actively rejecting the fate of her sisters. She criticizes Eleanor and Ferrars for their lack of affection in public, and she criticizes Marianne for choosing Colonel Brandon because the Delaford estate trumped love.
She sees their marriages as compromises.
Total compromises. So Margaret vows to marry for passion and to be on fire. She demands a love where their eyes blaze like meteors. This is a direct manifesto against Austen's conclusion that sense must always, always triumph over sensibility.
And into this walks her childhood friend, Hugh Skelmers Vaughan, Squibby, who has just returned from his grand tour to claim her. And she had previously rejected him, right?
Oh, yes, because he was too plain, too sensible, and he had the audacity to compare her to a tomato with carrot legs and beetroot feet.
Not the most romantic opening line.
Not at all. But Hugh's grand tour is where the historical accuracy discussion in this story really deepens. His letters, which Margaret shamelessly plans to ruthlessly steal for her novel.
I love that detail. She's a born writer.
They detail the compulsory elements of an English gentleman's education. This isn't just a vacation, it's mandated learning.
Right. It's a finishing school for the wealthy elite.
And we get the specifics. We hear about Parisian gentlemen drinking pernod, the absinthe, that emerald-colored drink. We hear about the Florentine prison, the Bargello, where paying a fine can commute a death sentence.
And Vienna's dancing madness.
Yes, and the required purchases for a proper education. Snuff boxes and statues of naked goddesses. It's a checklist.
What's fascinating about this, though, is how Hugh's letters analyze the way he used the tour to become the man Margaret would want. This wasn't passive tourism, it was a project.
That's a great point. It was a self-improvement project with a very specific goal.
He admits he only chose to read classics at Oxford to win her hand, not because he was naturally scholarly. He's performing intellectualism for her.
And he describes watching the Parisian opera dancers kicking their legs over their heads, and he compares them to the dead pigeons laid out after the hunt. He is consciously cultivating a specific, quirky literary sensibility because he thinks that's what will impress her.
He's proving his worth through intellectual and observational effort.
Which leads to the proposal scene, which is just a masterclass in literary romance that completely rejects melodrama.
It's not a blazing meteors moment.
Not at all. Hugh reveals that her previous rejection shattered him, and that, in his words, "I read literature in order to win your hand." He confesses that he stayed away because his love for her was so intense it made him feral.
It's a very honest, very vulnerable admission.
It is. It's an acceptance of the complex, messy reality of their shared history. And it culminates in them exchanging their childhood nicknames, Squibby and Snaps, as their true, preferred names. It cements an intellectual partnership over a theatrical burning romance.
That's a different kind of passion.
It is. Okay, now for a radical shift. Let's explore Caroline Bingley's reinvention in hoodoo. This one transports us entirely away from England to the American Western frontier in 1893.
This change of setting is, as you said before, tectonic. Caroline, the ultimate snob and foil in Pride and Prejudice, is now Caroline Bliguet, a white-passing Jean de couleur from New Orleans.
And she constructed her entire identity based on mastering this rigid, color-calibrated social code where the right shade of skin mattered more than the right heart.
So she's already an expert at performance.
A master of it. She rejects New Orleans after seeing the man she wants, to son Darcy, marry Eliza, a two-brown woman. And so she heads west to marry Ely Washington in a town called Carsondale. She's seeking the same kind of performative wealth and status she desired in England.
But her immediate dislocation is the whole crux of the story. On the train headed west, she is thrust into the segregated colored Pullman car.
And in that one move, she goes from the suffocating but at least nuanced stratification of New Orleans, where her currency was performance, to this crude, pragmatic frontier environment where her identity is brutally simplified.
All that intricate social knowledge is now useless.
Completely. And this is where the historical accuracy deep dive is so compelling. The sensory details of that colored Pullman car, the chicken fat smell, the farmers spitting into a tin, the resourceful cook Leslie May using sugar water to quiet a crying baby.
These details contrast so sharply with Caroline's crisp folds of my traveling dress that screamed of better company.
Her identity, which was so meticulously curated in New Orleans, is now just reduced to a stark binary classification. She's either white or she's not.
And the bounty hunter, Major, who is Ely Washington's brother, he embodies this death of nuance.
He really does.
He doesn't care about her sophisticated New Orleans pedigree. He just looks at her wrist and flatly observes, "I can see blue veins in your wrist."
And that one line just destroys her entire constructed identity.
He follows it up with, "We're not in New Orleans anymore, darling. It's a complete reset of the social rules."
And the major plot driver, which is just brilliant, is what the book calls the Great Sandwich Heist of 1893.
This is my favorite part.
Caroline uses her white passing privilege, she's mistaken for a brunette from Lake Charles, to go into the VIP section and procure cold cuts for the poor passengers in her car. She's navigating these Jim Crow-era restrictions where Negroes don't eat in main chambers.
The irony is just. It's perfect. In trying to maintain her appearance of superiority, she is forced into this genuine, rebellious communal act of defiance.
And when she's caught by the conductor, who hilariously mistakes her for a white debutante fleeing arranged marriage, she, Leslie May and Major are all locked into a scandalous confinement in the VIP parlor cabin.
This forced proximity, built on shared action and mutual recognition, is what leads to her instant, real connection with Major.
She is finding liberation in being, as he calls her, mean as a wet cat and breaking the rules rather than conforming to them, as she did her whole life.
Okay, let's transition from these amazing plots into an exhaustive analysis of the characters themselves. I want to focus really intensely on the internal life and the psychological transformation required for these protagonists to finally achieve agency.
Great. And we have to start with Mary Bennet in The Bennets of Jane Street. Her modern translation is just so authentic it hurts. She's a financially anxious New Yorker living in this beautiful but crumbling Greenwich Village brownstone.
She teaches piano to pay the bills, right?
Right. All while secretly writing drama, chasing the prestigious, and this is a perfect detail, the Lady de Burgh Prize.
Of course it is. The name still means something.
And her modern conflicts, they perfectly embody the original Mary's fate. She is the quiet intellectual, constantly overlooked by her more glamorous, successful sisters.
We see Lizzie Darcy show up in cuffed jeans, Jane with her perfect manicures, Lydia the peripatetic army wife in stilettos.
And they arrive with homemade cookies while Mary is doing the unnoticed, critical, unglamorous labor. She's plumbing the sink leak with an LED safety headband on. She's baking the family bread. She's caregiving for her aging parents.
So the ambition is huge, this literary prize. But her necessary practical work is completely invisible to her family.
And on top of it all, the family is facing the financial kill from their cousin, William Collins, who wants to sell the house out from under them. That financial anxiety, which causes the floor in the old house beneath Mary's feet suddenly to feel soft like wet sand, it just reinforces her link to the original precarious Bennet situation.
But the romantic figure, Joe Tarantello, the plumber and contractor, he's crucial. He's not a Darcy. He's not a Bingley. He's a plumber.
And that's why he works. He offers the external validation that Mary has craved her entire life. He connects her writing with working-class life. He sees her, and he challenges her self-perception. He says this amazing line to her: "You should never believe anything your parents tell you. They make every decision based on fear."
Wow. And that's exactly what held Mary back in the original novel, fear of being inadequate.
And he validates her physically and intellectually. He notes everything about her, her blue plaid shirt, her beautiful hands. And for Mary, this is transformative.
There's a moment where she realizes something about her father, isn't there?
Yes, it's a powerful moment of self-discovery. She's talking to Joe and she says, "I discovered the truth," as she said it. She had not made that connection before this conversation with Joe. And then she says, "Maybe because my father was a writer." She finally connects her intellectual ambition to her family legacy, prompted by the appreciation of someone who sees her intellectual and her practical depth as connected, not separate.
It's a beautiful arc. Now, let's move to Georgiana Darcy, who becomes Lady Stoughton. Her internal world is just a masterpiece of psychological trauma translated into historical fiction.
I agree. Her life is, on the surface, perfectly respectable. She has the Headsworth estate, she has her duties, she has a dependable husband, Edmund. But her mind, years later, still vibrates with the memory and the thrumming body fantasies of George Wickham.
Her whole life is a continuous performance of propriety.
Day in, day out. Her internal world, however, is this constant struggle between the shame her brother assumed she felt and the genuine, thrilling passion she remembers from that time in Margate.
And that's a powerful argument for separating the feeling of passion from the consequences of trauma. They aren't the same thing.
No, and the motherhood tangent in her story is key to illustrating this deep repression. Her young son, Thomas, insists on playing the bride in a wedding game.
The governess is horrified, of course.
Distraught. And Georgiana, struggling with her own unvanquished internal chaos, finds herself completely unable to handle her children's benign upsets. She just snaps the game to a halt.
She's so tightly wound by years of performing propriety that she cannot handle the benign chaos of childhood imagination.
It's a perfect illustration.
Yeah.
But I'm stuck on this point, though.
Yeah.
Does reclaiming the Wickham fantasy, as she does in the climax of the story, does that truly give her agency? Or is it just a complex, albeit maybe empowering, method of coping with unresolved trauma?
That is the core friction, isn't it? That's the question the story is asking. The climax, the kiss agency scene, it reframes that question entirely.
Also.
During intimacy with her husband, Edmund, she deliberately uses her Wickham fantasies. But the story frames this as an active, conscious choice. She is shifting her identity from victim, the girl whose trauma defined her, to a woman who knows what she wants and knows how to achieve it in the present moment.
So she's using the memory as a tool.
Precisely. She asserts, "They are memories and fantasies. They are mine to do with what I wish." This is the profound reclaiming of her own experience. The old thrill she remembers, she says now, goad me on, give strength to what is happening here.
It transforms the memory from a source of shame that was imposed on her by society into a tool for self-determination and personal pleasure.
It's active agency because she is the one setting the terms, even if the tools she's using are the remnants of her past pain. She's in control now.
That's a fantastic reading of it. Okay, finally, let's analyze Lydia Bennet's reinvention in Lydia's story. She is 36, a widow, living in quiet solitude, gardening to cope. The isolation is intense.
And her children are often away at Pemberley, right?
Yes, because Lizzie fears that Lydia's presence would stain the precious Darcy name. This isolation, this constant reminder that she is still a source of shame, it ensures her vulnerability is palpable from page 1.
And her second chance is initiated by Lizzie, who's trying to matchmake for her with the agreeable Mr. Wilson.
But Lydia immediately rejects this, and her reason shows how much she's matured. She tells her sister, so was Wickham.
She's learned that surface charm can mask danger.
Exactly. She finds herself drawn instead to the young, handsome vicar, Michael Haddad, who actively defends her against the townspeople's scorn. He doesn't just tolerate her past, he confronts it on her behalf.
The central humiliation revelation, though, is necessary for her to move forward.
It is. Lydia discovers that Darcy paid Wickham to marry her. He saved the family, yes, but he left her with this immense shame and the knowledge that her marriage was forced and bought.
Her entire adult life was based on a financial transaction she knew nothing about.
This leads to days of self-imposed exile. Her resentment isn't just toward Wickham anymore, but toward Darcy for knowing the price of her shame and never telling her.
The resolution, then, is a beautiful reversal of her original impulsive elopement.
A complete reversal. Haddad, the vicar, pursues her relentlessly. He helps her in the garden. He sees past her soiled reputation. He recognizes her spirit. He proposes, and he contrasts himself explicitly with Mr. Wilson.
He says he is considerably younger and more vigorous.
And he tells her unequivocally that she is deserving of love. The finale, where Darcy assists in their public reconciliation in the church, it cements her forgiveness and her future. It restores her to society, not as the scandalous figure, but as the vicar's beloved and accepted wife.
This moves us seamlessly into a deep dive on world building and authenticity. I want to focus now exclusively on the meticulous, lived-in details and the sensory elements that ground these really disparate stories.
Yes, let's. And let's start with Margaret Dashwood's environment, which I think defines what we could call the aesthetics of anxiety in Regency life.
Her self-consciousness is so physically manifested through these specific details. Her red hair, her plumpish figure, and especially her large feet, which she laments after Hugh compares her to a tomato with carrot legs and beetroot feet.
And she insists on having her thrush egg blue gown hemmed extra long to disguise her feet, which she tries to hide because ladies are supposed to tiptoe on their dainty toes.
The very clothes she wears are instruments of her psychological constraint. Her mother's provincialism ensures she is stuck with corsets as confining as my grandmother, which prevents her from enjoying the lighter, more fashionable French styles that are popular in high society.
And the social rituals are laid out with an almost military precision at the country house party she attends. The schedule is hunt for pigeons in the morning, assess the heiress in the evening, cards, dancing.
And Lady Middleton delivers that extraordinary, deeply cynical comment that the most important calculation a woman can make is weighing money against boredom.
That one single sentence perfectly encapsulates the calculated desperation that underlies all a high society matchmaking. It's a business transaction.
And the sensory details of the hunt, they're designed to clash violently with Margaret's romantic literary sensibility. She finds the revolting smell of blood mingled with gun oil completely unpublishable.
She can't romanticize it.
No. And the dead pigeons lying on the ground with their thin necks all crooked to the right, they remind Hugh not of romantic hunting trophies, but of the opera dancers he saw in Paris.
Margaret struggles to transform these unromantic, messy, real details into publishable material for her novel. And that struggle illustrates the gulf between real life and the idealized, sanitized fiction of the time.
Now, switching gears completely, let's discuss Mary Bennet's modern authenticity in the Bennets of Jane Street. The world building is established through these incredibly specific, slightly bohemian, and financially precarious details of the Greenwich Village brownstone.
It feels so real. You see the hodgepodge library where children's books like The Philharmonic Gets Dressed are wedged between Montaigne's essays and an almanac collection that went as far back as 1942.
This isn't just a generic library. It's the specific history of a specific intellectual but slightly disorderly New York family.
And the centerpiece of the house, the Steinway concertina piano, has this history that's rooted in the grit of New York wealth disparity. It was acquired from a Wall Street banker in a cocaine-fueled fire sale in 1980.
That detail is amazing. It firmly roots the Bennet family in a specific intellectual but slightly aging, slightly faded New York demographic. It reinforces their precarious financial status despite their obvious cultural capital.
And Mary's daily life is so authentic to her struggle. As we said, she uses an LED safety headband for plumbing leaks. She bakes her own bread using a machine she found in the basement.
And the modernizations of her sisters are spot on. Lizzie Darcy in her cuffed jeans and a barn jacket. Lydia, the peripatetic army wife who has more stepchildren over 3 marriages than Mrs. Bennet had grandchildren, and wears pencil jeans and stiletto heels.
These minute details instantly update the Bennet dynamic without losing any of their essential personalities.
Finally, the immersive world building of Caroline Blagay's American Western setting is absolutely essential for her transformation. Her journey starts in that segregated colored Pullman car where the sensory details are immediate and visceral.
The chicken fat smell, the farmer spitting into a tin, and the life-saving trick of Leslie May using sugar water to quiet a baby. Caroline, who lived her entire life based on refined senses and aesthetics, is just bombarded by the raw realities of survival.
And her identity shift is based entirely on this death of nuance that happens as soon as she leaves New Orleans. Her sophisticated Jean de Couleur identity is just erased.
The West only sees a simple color line. It's evidenced by the conductor's casual observation of the blue veins in your wrist. That's all that matters now.
And the new rules she learns are purely pragmatic, as she realizes, here, I was a woman in a delicate dress, traveling west with my servants. If I said so, it was so. She finds this new power in performing a simple, arbitrary white identity to protect her companions, tricking the station master to get them food.
And the world-building climax occurs when she gets to Carsondale. Ellie Washington's marble house is too pristine. It's described as pale, sharp, and strangely out of place. It smells of lavender, lemon polish, and nothing at all.
It's sterile.
Completely. This hyper-curated, sterile environment contrasts violently with Leslie May's loud, warm, wobbly boarding house kitchen, which smells of real food and real life and real people. Ellie's house represents the false performance of wealth and refinement that Caroline initially sought, but which she ultimately rejects for the authentic chaos of the boarding house.
This exhaustive world building, it leads us directly into the central themes of the collection. It allows us to explore how these stories about the past comment so profoundly on present-day issues, particularly female agency and the very definition of happiness.
Let's delve into agency and the rejection of expectation first. And this is exemplified perfectly by the modern descendant, Eliza Williams, who descends from the Sense and Sensibility lineage.
Her ancestor, Eliza Fowler, who is trapped in that loveless social contract after Willoughby's betrayal, demanded agency and choice for her daughter.
And the modern relevance is just shocking in its directness. We find the descendant, Eliza Williams, age 27, in the bathroom of a dive bar in East Hampton, having a full-blown panic attack about marriage and kids.
She feels locked in a social contract that she had never actually signed.
That pressure to conform, to marry, to reproduce, it perfectly mirrors the historical constraint that was imposed on her ancestor 200 years earlier.
And the sisterhood scene in the bathroom is the thematic core of modern agency. Women, their names are Emma, Anne, Lizzie. They surround her and offer support. They remind her, you can change your mind, you have a choice.
And then comes the powerful mantra, delivered by a woman who is reapplying her cherry red lipstick. It's the definitive modern statement on the subject. She says, never set yourself on fire so someone else can stay warm.
It's an incredible line. It is a complete rejection of centuries of female performance and self-sacrifice for the comfort of others.
And this connects so beautifully to the theme of redefining love and happiness in the Margaret Dashwood case.
Right. Margaret initially believes in love as burning and raging with eyes that blaze like meteors. This is the sensibility she inherited from her sister Marianne.
But her realization, prompted by Hugh's very intellectual and carefully planned proposal, is that love might look entirely different from the theatrical romance novels of the era.
Love might be two people who go together like butter and marmalade.
Familiar, comfortable, and necessary. Hugh's commitment studying literature to win her hand, cataloging all the places she'd love to visit, that is the true, profound passion. It's rooted in respect and long-term planning, not immediate melodrama.
That whole arc, it validates the quieter, less theatrical forms of sensibility that Austen herself once seemed to condemn. It suggests that real happiness isn't a blinding lightning strike, but a respectful, shared intellectual curiosity.
And they cement this by immediately claiming squibby and snaps as their preferred secret identity. They're affirming their specific, non-traditional bond over any kind of societal title like lord or lady.
Next, we have to revisit the cost of performance, which is Caroline Bliguet's central theme. What does it cost a person to spend their entire life performing their class or their race?
Caroline's life in New Orleans was a constant, exhausting performance. As she says, the performance never stopped, not even when you were alone.
The modern liberation she finds then is in authenticity. She wins Major's heart not by being the beauty of New Orleans, but by being her authentic self, brave enough to steal sandwiches, resourceful, and ultimately by helping Leslie May birth a baby in the rough reality of the Western frontier.
The love she finds with Major is rooted in shared action and mutual recognition. It's perfectly encapsulated when he simply tells her, "I've seen you."
That recognition is a profound rejection of Ely Washington's curated falsehoods. Ely wanted her because she was the beauty of New Orleans, a trophy who fulfilled his schedule and performed his wealth.
Major wants her because she's the mean as a wet cat who broke the rules and revealed her true character through action. He saw the real person, not the performance.
And finally, there's Hetty Bates and the reclamation of youth. Her earlier life story reveals her true love, Edward Harris, Baron Courtney, who left years ago to secure a fortune so he could marry her.
But she sacrificed her youth to care for her ailing mother, forced into a life of what she calls quiet desperation.
The theme here is the power of not giving up hope, even when it seems completely lost. When Edward returns, years later, he confesses to spending all that time hating the man you married, a man who, thankfully for him, never existed.
And Hetty's response is so simple and devastating. She just says, "I did not marry. I was well, but not very happy. How could I be? I was not with you."
His return is not just a proposal, it's a reawakening of her entire personality.
It is. She tells him, "I never danced again," because he left. The fact that he rails against the fictional husband she never had makes her laugh, a sound she hadn't made in ages. The story grants her the return of her full, vital, snappy, and bad-tempered and endlessly curious self.
This exhaustive analysis, it brings us to our final verdict and the educational impact of this anthology. Did the authors truly achieve their goal of giving these characters purpose and connection? And what can we, as readers and writers, take away about the craft of historical fiction?
Unequivocally, yes.
Yes.
They absolutely did. By granting them agency, validation, and these complex internal lives, the authors proved the enduring flexibility of Austen's archetypes. The collection's range is just astonishing.
It really is. You go from the intimate, internal psychological drama of Georgiana's fantasies
to the sweeping social commentary that spans different eras in Caroline's Western road trip. This just demonstrates that historical constraints, even from 200 years ago, still offer incredibly fertile ground for examining the human condition today.
So let's synthesize the most memorable literary details, the specific nuggets that truly stick with the listener and elevate this collection beyond a simple retelling. For me, I keep returning to the use of classic literature in Margaret's story.
Andrew Marvell's poem to his coy mistress. It's used so brilliantly by Hugh.
It is. He recites the stanza to her specifically. 200 to adore each breast, but 30,000 to the rest.
And Hugh uses this poem, which is traditionally an argument for urgent seduction, as a compliment on her enduring worth and beauty. He assures her he found none of her parts chaste. It's a very intellectual seduction that only Margaret, the writer, would truly appreciate.
In Margaret's detailed literary description of the boiled boar's head at Sir John Middleton's dinner party, her attempt to find material for her novel.
Yes, she describes it as resembling a little tipsy Bacchus with a wreath of grape leaves over one eye. That single, intellectualized, detailed observation establishes her as a true writer, someone capable of transforming the unromantic and even the slightly grotesque into literary material.
You also have to remember the significance of names.
Absolutely. Hugh and Margaret claiming Squibby and Snaps as their preferred secret identity is a sign of a deep mutual understanding that supersedes any societal titles.
And Caroline's identity shift from Bliguet to the woman who can trick a conductor and perform white privilege to save her companions. Her name changes, but more importantly, her understanding of who she is changes.
And the quiet power of the non-wedding of Eliza Williams, the descendant, where she chooses love without the marriage contract. Her partner, Ben, says, "I don't need to marry you to love you, Eliza. I just want to be there with you through all of it."
That completely modern rejection of the binding contract that defined their ancestors' suffering is just such a powerful statement about progress.
And I think it's important to acknowledge the writer's craft here. The authors themselves, they come from very diverse backgrounds. We have an Emmy-nominated TV producer, a former journalist, a tech anthropologist.
Their nonfiction and modern expertise clearly fuels this reimagining process. It allows them to anchor these historical figures in specific modern anxieties like plumbing leaks and financial precarity, making them feel real.
And the metafiction element, particularly Margaret Dashwood's journal entries, provides a real educational impact on the writing process itself.
She's constantly documenting things, realizing the difficulty of finding a romantic simile that hasn't been used before. She's cataloging details and realizing that she needs to move characters around to make the story work.
She is learning how to structure and write fiction in real time, and in doing so, she's offering a masterclass to the reader.
So, if we synthesize everything we've learned today, what's the ultimate lesson of this collection? For me, it explores the idea that sometimes the true path to self-discovery requires a complete rejection of the self you are trained to be.
Whether that means running to the western frontier, or finally cutting your heavy, painful braid and speaking your truth in a crowded ballroom.
And it raises a powerful, final, provocative thought for you, the listener. These characters were constrained by a historical context, rules of virtue, wealth, and silence, that forced them to perform a certain kind of life until they were finally granted agency.
So the question becomes, what historical constraint from your own life, whether it's inherited, societal, or self-imposed, are you still performing? And what unsung part of yourself is waiting for its story, waiting